Hello, it's Steve Fentress on behalf of the Strassenberg Planetarium at your Rochester Museum and Science Center with all 88 constellations. In the planetarium, when we show constellations such as Taurus the Bull, Ursa Major the Great Bear, Bootes the Herdsman, kids often ask, well, how many constellations are there in all? Well, it depends how you count. There are lots of different ways of naming things in the sky. In the ancient Chinese philosophy, there are many, many small constellations of just a few stars each. Hawaiian star groupings are entirely different. The Aboriginal people of Australia gave names to dark patches in the Milky Way. In the ancient Near Eastern world, there were many constellations created that fell into disuse. But the constellations we have on star charts around the world today came from the International Astronomical Union, an organization of professional astronomers who decided in 1930 they needed to straighten out which parts of the sky were going to be assigned to which constellations so that astronomers could talk to each other and understand which star they were talking about. They settled on 88 constellations covering the whole sky, and here they are. Here we are recreating the sky using our E&S, Evans and Sutherland Digistar 6 software in its capacity to make a sky on a flat screen. So imagine the curved edge of the planetarium dome going around you. And we're going to look at all 88 constellations, starting with the ancient 48, as they're sometimes called. The Greek-Egyptian astronomer Ptolemy, around the year 150 AD or CE, compiled what was known about ancient Greek astronomy at that time in a book, and he named 48 constellations. And we're going to start with those constellations. There's Pisces the Fishes, Aries the Ram, Taurus the Bull, Gemini the Twins. Those constellations that more or less occupy that strip of the sky where the sun travels over the course of the year, the region called the zodiac. There's Cancer the Crab. With each constellation, you see an orange figure, or at least so far they're yellow-orange, a figure representing the character the constellation is named after, some red sticks linking up stars in a pattern that the eye might be able to find. There's Leo the Lion and Virgo, Maiden of the Harvest. And then green boundaries that meet at right angles, Libra the Scales there. Those are the boundaries that were agreed upon by the International Astronomical Union in 1930. Scorpius the Scorpion, Sagittarius the Archer. And you'll see when we're done, the IAU boundaries cover the entire sky, so every star is in some constellation definitely. Capricornus the Sea Goat, and finishing the 12 constellations of the zodiac, Aquarius the Water Bearer. And the reason the International Astronomical Union wanted to divide up the sky like this was to make it possible for professional astronomers to talk to each other. So if you had, say, an astronomer from China talking to an astronomer from Spain, and they were talking about a star in Aquarius, they could be sure whether or not they were talking about the same star. To look at more of the ancient 48 constellations, let's look at a familiar region of the sky. Look there just right of center for the Big Dipper, and the last two stars in the cup of the Big Dipper point to the North Star, which is in the constellation Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, which also contains the Little Dipper. The North Star is at the tip of the Little Bear's tail, or the end of the Little Dipper's handle. And there's the Big Bear containing the Big Dipper. The curved handle of the Big Dipper, or the Big Bear's tail, follow the arc to Arcturus, that bright star between the knees of Bootes the Herdsman. Also in this part of the sky, Draco the Dragon, a kind of hard-to-find constellation that weaves around between the two dippers. And while we're here, Hercules, or in Greek mythology, Heracles, which is in this same general area, so that's why we put him here. We're going to explore all these 48 constellations in groups that at least make sense visually, I hope. Now we're going to swing around to another familiar part of the sky. Look there just below the center of your screen for 3 stars close together in a straight line, surrounded by a rectangle of stars, and the star at the upper left-hand corner of the rectangle is reddish, that's Betelgeuse, and the 3 stars are the belt of Orion, the mighty hunter. And let's look at constellations in this region of the sky. There's a pretty prominent pattern of stars under Orion's feet, but we don't hear the name much. That's the constellation Lepus the Hare. The 3 stars of Orion's belt point to the brightest star in the entire night sky, Sirius, which is in Canis Major, the big dog. There's also a little dog, Canis Minor, with just 2 noticeable stars, Procyon, which is a really bright one, and another one called Gomeza. Up above Orion's head, Auriga, the charioteer, contains a really bright star, Capella. Now let's swing over to another easy-to-recognize part of the sky. Check the center of your screen for 3 stars, 3 bright stars making a triangle shaped like a slice of pizza pointing south. Pizza. The summer triangle, as stargazers like to call it, because most people first notice it in the evening in the summer. The brightest star in the summer triangle, Vega, is in the constellation Lyra, the lyre, an ancient musical instrument, ancestor of our harp and guitar. Deneb is the tail of Cygnus the swan, and also part of a pattern that's sometimes called the Northern Cross. The 3rd star in the summer triangle, Altair, in the constellation Aquila the eagle, and the artist seems here to have drawn on mythology where the eagle is carrying away Ganymede. There are some little constellations here as well, Sagitta the arrow, and over to the left, a really cute one, Delphinus the dolphin. And still farther to the left, small and obscure, Equuleus the foal, the little horse. Now, some constellations are directly connected to mythology, others not so much, but here's a group of constellations that is definitely connected to Greek mythology and to each other, the constellations of the Perseus and Andromeda story. Look in the middle of your screen for that kind of bent W of stars. That makes Cassiopeia, the queen of Ethiopia, whose vanity started the whole Perseus-Andromeda adventure. Then her husband, King Cepheus. Their daughter, Princess Andromeda. And down low on your left, the giant constellation Cetus, the sea monster, who was about to devour Andromeda, but at the last moment, just in time, arrived the superhero Perseus. There he is carrying the head of Medusa, which he had just obtained. And there's Pegasus, the flying horse, on which Perseus and Andromeda rode off to live happily ever after at the end of the story. Continuing with Ptolemy's ancient 48 constellations, we look down south at stars that are mostly not above the horizon as seen from Rochester, New York today, but they were above the horizon as seen from the Mediterranean and the ancient Near East 3,000 years ago, when we think a lot of these constellations were decided on. Here are parts of the great ship Argo. This is Carina, the keel, which contains Canopus, the 2nd brightest star in the night sky after Sirius. The poop deck, Pupus, or the stern of the ship. Vela the sail, which has in it the Vela supernova remnant, which has been photographed by great telescopes, the smithereens of a star 12,000 years after it exploded. And the huge constellation Hydra the sea serpent. Continuing our tour of the southern boundary of the ancient 48 constellations, look near the bottom center of your screen for two bright stars close together. Those are Alpha and Beta Centauri. They are in the constellation of the Centaur, Centaurus. And just in front of the back feet of the Centaur, that's the Southern Cross. We will get to that in a while. Also in this part of the sky, another ancient constellation, Lupus the Wolf. And Ara the Altar. As seen from Earth's southern hemisphere, it is said that the Milky Way looks like smoke rising from the altar. Working our way around, here's a part of the sky we haven't gotten to yet, a big expanse that's blank so far, and maybe you can see a sort of string of stars swooping down and then back up to the right. That is a giant serpent, the constellation Serpents, so big it's actually divided into two parts, a head and a tail. And the head part of the constellation Serpents contains the Eagle Nebula, which became famous in the Pillars of Creation picture taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. And here's the man who handles the serpent, Ophiuchus. Finishing up with the ancient 48 constellations, we're going to start with a small one right at the center of your screen, right to the left of that fish, the left-hand fish. Watch for the little constellation Triangulum, the triangle. And this is famous because in this part of the sky is a beautiful spiral galaxy called M33, one of the most spectacular ones in the sky after the Andromeda galaxy. And down low, there's Eridanus the river, which starts at one of Orion's feet and flows way down south. Turning to our left a bit, down near the bottom of your screen, four stars that may look like the shape of a kite that's tilted over to the right a little bit. The constellation Corvus, the crow. And to the right of that, some faint stars in a constellation I've never heard anyone mention, Crater, the cup. Now we just have a couple of more obscure ones to put in here. Watch below the bow of Sagittarius for Corona Australis, the southern crown. And a little farther to the left, Piscis Austrinus, the southern fish. We hardly ever talk about the constellation, but that bright star in it is Famolo, one of the brightest stars in the sky. Very noticeable on autumn evenings. Now we're going to jump forward in time from ancient times to 1687, when Polish astronomer Johannes Hevelius published a star atlas and named some additional constellations. Way up on the upper right, a vast area with just faint stars, and Hevelius called it lynx. He said you need the eyesight of a lynx to even see it because the stars are so faint. Then above Leo, the original Leo, Leo Minor, the little lion, which contains the object called Hanni's Voorwerp. A schoolteacher named Hanni van Arkel, participating in a citizen science project, discovered a weird object in that constellation a few years ago. Here are the hunting dogs, Canis venatici. They may be Boötes' dogs, Asterion and Shara, so the artist has shown Boötes holding their leash. Over on your left there, Vulpecula, the little fox, holding an ill-fated goose, and way up there at the upper left, Lacerta the lizard. Down at the lower left, that's Scutum, the shield, named in honor of a Polish king, one of the very few constellations named in honor of a royal person where the name actually stuck. And way over there on the right, Sextans, the sextant, an astronomical navigation instrument. Now we go still farther forward in time to Dutch explorers. Peter Dirkzoon Keizer and Frederik de Houtman came up with some new constellations when they traveled on an expedition to the South Seas, saw stars that Europeans had never seen, and invented some constellations inspired by fantastic new things they were seeing on their travels. Here's Phoenix the Phoenix. Triangulum Australe, the Southern Triangle. Pavo the Peacock, which contains one bright star, which is now called Peacock. There's Grus the Crane, which is the home of the Spare Tire Nebula. You can look it up. Apis, the bird of paradise, has almost no noticeable stars. Nor does Chameleon, although giant telescopes in the looking at the constellation Chameleon have found 3 large areas where new stars are being born. Here's Dorado the goldfish, which overlaps most of a companion galaxy to ours, the Large Cloud of Magellan, so you hear about stars in Dorado quite often. Hydrus the water snake. Indus the Indian, representing people that the Dutch explorers had never seen before. Way down at the bottom, watch for Musca the fly, formerly Apis the bee. Home of the Hourglass Nebula, an object that became very famous in a beautiful Hubble Space Telescope photograph. And Tucana the Toucan contains another neighboring galaxy of ours, the Small Cloud of Magellan. And the last of our Dutch constellations, Volans the Flying Fish, which contains the Meat Hook Galaxy. You can look it up. Now we go forward to the 1750s. French astronomer Nicolas Louis de Lacaille spent several years observing the sky from Cape Town, South Africa, did a lot of cutting-edge observations for the time, cataloged about 10,000 stars, and proposed some constellations. Down there at the bottom, that's Fornax the Furnace. Sometimes you hear about the Fornax Galaxy Cluster, which is in that direction. In very center there, Octans the Octant, a navigation instrument, and that is the constellation that contains the south pole of the sky. There really is no prominent south star. There is a star there called Sigma Octantis, which is just barely visible to the unaided eye and doesn't look special at all. Over on your right, that's Antlia the air pump. So Lacaille's theme here is humans as creators and makers and builders. Down at the bottom, Selim the chisel. Circinus the drafting compass up there top center. Horologium the clock. And these constellations are in parts of the sky that have few bright stars, but he wanted to name them anyway. That's Mensa, the Table Mountain that's famously visible from Cape Town, starting the tradition of naming things in the sky after the place where they were observed from. And we still hear today many objects in the sky have Hawaiian names or names from indigenous cultures in Chile, because those are places where there are some of the greatest observatories in modern times. On your upper left, that's Microscopium, the microscope. Right on top, that's Norma, the carpenter's square. Pictor, the painter's easel. Over on your far right, under the air pump, is Pyxis, the mariner's compass. And a little one right in the center, Reticulum, the crosshairs in a telescope eyepiece. Over on the left, Sculptor, the sculptor's studio. And up on the upper left, you'll see Telescopium, the telescope, another part of the sky with nothing noticeable, but Lacaille gave a name to it. Well, we don't have much to go. We now go forward to Flemish cartographer Petrus Plancius, who, collaborating with a globe maker named Hondius in 1612, proposed, lower center there in magenta, Columba the dove carrying an olive branch from the Noah's Ark story. Right in the middle there, yes, it's a unicorn, not part of the Noah's Ark story. Monoceros the unicorn. Up in the north, a large area of the sky with no bright noticeable stars. And Plancius called it Camelopardalus the giraffe. Well, we have only two more areas of the sky to mop up here. Over on the left, watch for a very faint splash of stars. The ancient Greeks called it Ariadne's hair, but for some reason Ptolemy did not mention it as a constellation, so it didn't get a general name until much later. That's Coma Berenices, Bernice's hair. And we will plunge far down to the south for a small constellation, but small but bright, very noticeable. It is featured on the flags of 5 countries. Which countries are they? You can find out. Look there just to the left of the center for Crux, the Southern Cross, which points at the south pole of the sky. Take away the art and we have at least a suggested pattern of sticks for finding these constellations. And we take those away and we are left with the constellation boundaries that astronomers agreed on in 1930, so that every star could be said to be part of a constellation and astronomers could talk to each other more clearly about which star they were thinking about. So there you have it, a look, at least a brief look, at every one of the constellations on modern star charts. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.